Exploring Newer Ways of Adult Learning. Now, this is not by any means the be-all, end-all of all the amazing information in chapters 8, 9, and 10. But to be realistic, there's no way you could read everything. So this is a summation. Here we go. These are the topics: embodied or somatic learning, spiritual, not religious, spiritual learning, narrative learning, learning with a Confucian philosophy, learning with a Hindustan philosophy, learning with an Islamic perspective, learning with an indigenous African perspective, learning with a critical theory perspective, and then within critical theory we'll look at two specific kinds, postmodern and feminist. Now, before we get into this, I just want to make a quick comment. Why do we even call these new, quote unquote? Well, if we look at what our Western ideal of learning actually is, it's so focused on a specific kind of mental process, something that only takes place in the head of the individual. And we actually have Descartes, the French philosopher, to thank for that. He created this understanding that to discover what is real, you have to prove that in no way it isn't real. And the only thing he could actually validate that couldn't not be real, try saying that 5 times fast, was thinking, thought. He's the one, I think, therefore I am. So this started this whole understanding in the Western world that if it isn't something abstract, something only learned and constructed and dealt with in the brain, that it wasn't valid. With that in mind, let's look at these different forms of learning which truly have validity in and of themselves and offer us different ways of understanding our adult learners, not only those who come in with perhaps these or related backgrounds, but also for ourselves to explore the different ways we can bring learning to our students and help them discover knowledge and understanding that isn't quote unquote traditional. So we move forward, starting with embodied or somatic learning. This is learning that is done in and through the body rather than the mind or the brain. This is actually a very hot topic today in pop culture. Do a quick search on the internet and you'll find 100 hits, including on big publications like Time and Newsweek. There's one particular researcher, Aman, who had a lot to say about this, how embodied or semantic learning, even though it's been treated as irrelevant, it's impossible for us to consider irrelevant because we as humans are physical beings. Take this a step further and you can see how it relates strongly to the whole idea of experiential learning. In our book, Miriam, I hope I'm saying that right, I've said that name 1,000 times, Miriam says learning in the experience is immediate, physical, and emotional. We can all make connections between when we've learned something and literally felt an electric jolt, whether it was positive or negative or just shocking. One example in the book is the experience of learning Japanese calligraphy and how the person studying this came to recognize that as he was creating certain specific symbols or shapes, there was a physical feeling within him that came to be related to those shapes and what they actually meant. My favorite way of looking at this is the stove. We can tell someone, please don't touch the stove, it's hot, but what do we always do? We put our hand closer and closer and closer to feel the heat. We only know it's hot because we feel it, and our body has learned if something is hot, don't reach out and touch it. Next, we move to spiritual. Again, not religious. Religion is more of an organized thing. Spirituality is more of a personal belief, a connection between your own experience and some divine spirit or higher purpose. Spirituality is about creating your own personal understanding of what is sacred. And one author in particular, Tisdale, in 2003 wrote of 7 guides for defining spirituality, including this one here. Spiritual development constitutes moving toward greater authenticity or toward a more authentic self. This is a really neat understanding that this whole idea of trying to connect to some greater being, greater power, source of the universe, helps us as individuals come closer to who we are at the core of ourselves, connected strongly to the inward search for meaning in life that is very typical of midlife adults. I love this quote. All participants in their study, irrespective of gender and cohort, which would be social status, increased significantly in spirituality between late and older adulthood. Well, it makes sense, right? As we get older and we have to deal with our humanity, our human frailties, and the fact that we're not going to live forever, we do begin searching more for meaning. And some people buy a Corvette. But that's a whole nother topic. All right, moving on. Narrative learning, storytelling, man's oldest form of making sense in the world, focused more on sharing meaning than on facts or dates or discrete unconnected types of knowledge. So then, what kinds of things fall into this narrative learning world? Well, we have autobiographies, we have first-person accounts, which for both adults and children, both of these are amazing resources to try and get people to step out of their own individual understanding of the world and see it through the eyes of the people actually there. And then narrative learning in particular helps us with cultural understandings. It's through the tales and the morals that are shared through story more than any type of important research paper that we learn about a society, that families share values. We see what's important. Moving on, learning with a Confucian philosophy. Imitation of another's virtues is absolutely the golden key. Miriam, here on page 226, I quote, imitation of the conduct of the sages is true learning. Thus, again, experiential. You want to better yourself by imitating those who you respect. And it's through that imitation that you come to learn and embody and understand why such behavior is important. There is a belief that learning should be enjoyed throughout the day and that it's very holistic. It's not piecemeal. They don't break up the Confucian curriculum, if you will, in this world. It's all about bringing it together and learning through, again, imitation and experience. Teachers in this world are highly regarded for only they know when the student is ready to learn and or learn more.